In the final days of World War II, Allied troops liberated the survivors of the Nazi extermination camps. Whatever doubts Americans might have had about the war and about the righteousness of their cause were now removed. The enormity of Hitler's crime against humanity was almost incomprehensible. Here, for all to see at last, was a doctrine of racial superiority carried to its inevitable extreme, genocide. The story and the memory of the Holocaust would grow in the American consciousness for years to come. But in post-war America, there was no rush to stamp out racial prejudice and injustice. What happened in the years that followed World War II is, of course, another story. Across the world, the seeds of the Cold War, of Korea, of Vietnam, had already been planted. America, once so complacent and self-contained, would never be the same again. Americans never found a way back to what they believed existed before the war.
There's a star-spangled banner waving somewhere. That is where I want to live when I die.
The war years brought a tremendous shift in population. 15 million Americans had packed up their music and their accents and their attitudes and moved from the country to the city, from the south to the north, from the east to the west. By the millions, they left their farms and small towns to find work, and many stayed where they found it. The war brought big government to America. Never before had Washington employed so many people or exercised so much direct control over the personal lives of individual American citizens. Rationing ended when the war ended. Wage and price controls were lifted, but not the income tax. The War Department changed its name and continued to spend the taxpayers' money for defense. Big business got bigger during the war. With increased capital, production capacity, and new technology, American industry was in a position to dominate the post-war domestic and world markets. America owned 50% of the world's material assets for a time. Bigness changed America's small towns. The neighborhood grocer gave way to the new, impersonal, cost-efficient supermarket. Before the war, 23% of the American people lived on farms. 50 years later, just 2%. Many American farm families were replaced by corporations. Something called the agribusiness took hold.
This job belongs to some soldier. When he comes back, he can have it.
Many American women were forced to retreat to the kitchen when the war ended. They had done men's work in industry during the war. They had managed their own lives while their men were away. For some, the return to the pre-war role of housewife and mother was difficult. Some women continued to work after the war because they wanted to or because they had to, but not on an equal footing with men. It would take a long time for American women to overcome male prejudice in the workplace, to move from the lunchroom to the boardroom. Traditional standards of behavior and morality were challenged and ignored during the excitement and disruption of the war. Too many young Americans had gone too far away from home, into the service or to the wartime boom towns. Loose behavior was tolerated, even justified. Many hasty wartime marriages fell apart. For the first time in America, divorce became commonplace. Traditional courting patterns changed. American parents had less to say about whom their children married. Marry they did, thanks to the GI Bill, by the millions. In just 50 years, the population of the United States doubled. Most black Americans emerged from the war not much better off than they had been before Pearl Harbor. Some black servicemen, those who were given the chance, distinguished themselves in combat. But the armed forces were not desegregated until 1948. Eventually, a black general would become chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but not until 40 years later. White Americans seemed determined to maintain a segregated society by law or by custom. But black Americans had learned that change was possible and perhaps inevitable. A nation that had crusaded against Hitler's racist ideology could not, in good conscience, forever deny full civil rights to any of its citizens.